She had been on her feet for hours, serving tables and enduring contemptuous glances. The young waitress, named Valeria, had learned from a young age to keep smiling through any storm. But that afternoon was different. In that elegant downtown restaurant, where customers seemed more concerned with flaunting their money than enjoying their meal, humiliations rained down relentlessly. "Could you hurry up? Don't you see we're in a hurry?" snapped the lady sharply, as she lightly pushed the tray with a gloved hand in perfect manicure. Valeria nodded quickly, though inside she felt anger mixed with sadness. She tried to calm herself. She had learned to read these situations and tuck them away in a drawer of forgetfulness. But something in the atmosphere that afternoon was heavier, more suffocating. At the neighboring table, a group of wealthy businessmen were sipping their French wine with airs of superiority. "Do these girls really work here? They don't seem like professionals," one murmured through stifled laughter, looking at Valeria as if she were an invisible decoration, or worse, a nuisance. His words were not as quiet as intended, and the young woman couldn't help but hear that silent stab. Despite everything, Valeria kept her composure. She knew what she had and what she wanted. However, the storm was only just beginning. While cleaning an empty table, a man in a flawless suit entered the restaurant. His presence commanded silence. No one really knew who he was, but the way he walked, with a steady step and attentive eyes, made even the waiters pause for a moment. Valeria glanced at him sideways. She had heard rumors about the restaurant's owner, a successful but very reserved businessman. Some said he rarely set foot in the place, and when he did, it was to personally assess the environment. But that day, when he approached the bar where Valeria was organizing the cutlery, something changed. His gaze went beyond appearances. It seemed to read her soul. The gloved lady, noticing the man's arrival, wore a fake smile and said loudly in a venomous tone, "How lucky to have someone so nice to serve us, isn't it? Although, well, I don't know if I'd recommend staying long with a waitress. Like her, she seems unprofessional." Tension rose in the establishment. Some customers exchanged nervous looks, as if waiting for a reaction. But Valeria, breathing deeply, held her head high and kept working. The owner, the man in the suit, approached that table and greeted politely but firmly. "Good afternoon. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Arturo. I'm doing a round to make sure everything is in order." The lady blinked, surprised by his confidence. "Of course, Mr. Arturo. We were just commenting on service details." Arturo looked carefully around, his eyes scanning every corner of the place. But when they finally settled on Valeria, a kind of imperceptible smile appeared on his face. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. Our priority is to offer a 5-star experience, no matter who is serving you. After all, respect begins with how we treat our team." Murmurs among the customers grew louder. Some lowered their heads, uncomfortable with a remark that seemed like a veiled lesson. The gloved lady sighed, feigning indifference. But Arturo didn't stop there. He turned to Valeria and said, "Could you show me how you organize your section today?" The young woman tilted her head, surprised and a little nervous, but keeping it subtle. "Of course, sir." As she went to show him her area, Arturo followed attentively. The way Valeria described her work reflected not only professionalism, but passion. She spoke of every detail, every table, as if it were the stage for stories waiting to be discovered. It was clear she loved what she did. But then, the cruel words of the customers seemed even emptier. How could they judge someone without knowing her truth? That question hung in the air. Arturo made a quick call and requested a document be brought to his office, while Valeria returned to attend to the customers. In her mind, the young woman tried to ignore the growing curiosity, but couldn't help thinking that something important was about to happen. At the businessmen's table, the youngest seemed restless, as if sensing that his power play was about to collapse. Meanwhile, Valeria felt a slight knot in her stomach, not only because of the overwhelming looks and comments, but because she sensed that unexpected visit would change everything. When Arturo returned, holding a large contract, he called everyone present. "I believe this restaurant deserved only the best, and the best has always been right in front of you today," he said, while holding the paper that seemed to have an official and important seal. The silence was absolute. The gloved lady dropped her glass unintentionally. The businessmen exchanged worried glances. Arturo stepped forward and declared firmly, "This young woman you have been belittling is not only our best waitress, but also the new operations manager of this place." The shock was palpable. No one expected it. Valeria herself couldn't hold back a smile mixing relief and pride, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her soul. Waves of disbelief and surprise mingled in the air. How could someone so humble and simple take on such a position with so much responsibility? That was the question exploding in everyone's minds. But Arturo closed the day with a final phrase that chilled any hint of malice. In this restaurant, value isn't measured by the suit you wear or the amount of money in your account. It's measured by the respect, dedication, and heart with which you do your job. Valeria lowered her gaze shy as the looks around her shifted, not with contempt this time, but with genuine admiration. That night, as she left, the young woman knew nothing would ever be the same again. Because sometimes the greatest blow of justice doesn't come from good arguments, but from facts that speak for themselves. And that was only the first page of a story she was about to write with strength and dignity. What would the coming days hold? How would she handle the mix of power and challenge? The answer seemed as close as the new sparkle in her eyes. This was just a beginning, and no one in that restaurant would ever forget that afternoon that changed everything in a single blow. The restaurant was full. The murmur of conversations mixed with the clinking of cutlery and the aroma of food, creating an atmosphere that seemed cozy from the outside, but inside hid another kind of tension. Teresa, the waitress with shy smile and steady gaze, walked confidently between the tables, serving plates with natural grace that didn't quite fit in that environment where some customers looked at her with prejudice. She knew it. She felt in the air when, approaching certain tables, the men in suits frowned as if her presence bothered them. It wasn't the first time they humiliated her, and it wouldn't be the last. Yet, Teresa held a secret more valuable than any jewel. One day, that very place that underestimated her would become the stage where everything changed for her. That night, a group of wealthy people had reserved the best table. They did not come hungry. They came with disdain, with that arrogance that money brings when they believe everything belongs to them. Teresa approached with the menu, asked what they wanted to drink, and at first the answer was a mix of sarcasm and contempt. "Are you the waitress? You don't even seem from here. Don't you have anything better to do?" The voice, low but cutting, overflowed with disdain. Teresa took a deep breath, maintained admirable composure, and with a soft but firm voice replied, "I am here to make sure your experience is the best. What can I bring you?" It wasn't kindness they received in return, but a constant rain of hurtful comments amid suppressed laughs, as if belittling her made them better people. Teresa listened carefully, perfecting the order with the same professionalism, although the humiliation stung more and more. The customers demanded dishes that were not on the menu, mocked the wait times, her accent, her way of walking. In those moments, the restaurant seemed to forget its purpose, and the world shrank to a small stage of unjust humiliation. What kind of people sat there to feel so superior? One of the closest tables watched silently, an older couple who appeared uncomfortable with the situation, but no one intervened. Indifference was queen that night, while the looks cut like daggers. Teresa asked for support from her co-worker, a young man with a knowing look who tried to encourage her with a shy smile that said, "Hang in there a little longer." Just when it seemed that emotional torture would never end, the restaurant door opened with a long creak that caught everyone's attention. A man entered. He was neither a regular customer, nor did he seem to be part of the staff. He walked with firm step, an imposing presence, but calm. What no one knew was that this man, with his impeccable suit and piercing gaze, was the true owner of the establishment, hidden behind the curtain of everyday life. He avoided appearing so as not to interfere with the usual dynamics, but that night something in the atmosphere displeased him. He walked straight to the table where Teresa endured the silent humiliation and, without saying a word, stood right in front of those arrogant and rude customers. Tension rose instantly. The rich began to look at him with disdain, as if daring him to act, but he smiled, a smile that did not announce war but justice. "Excuse me," he said with confident and measured voice. "It seems there is a misunderstanding about the treatment we all deserve in this place." The customers were surprised. The atmosphere became heavy. The older couple softly applauded. Some waiters also looked at Teresa with new respect, as if the curtain hiding the truth was being lifted little by little. Teresa, still trembling from a mix of fear and hope, looked up to find in that figure support she had never imagined. The owner continued, "Teresa is one of the best friends I have in this restaurant. She knows our dishes, serves with her heart, and is the soul of this place. Her work is what keeps this dream alive. Therefore, I would ask you to moderate your words." The men who humiliated her didn't know what to say. Their arrogance had vanished like water through their hands. The owner did not speak only as a boss, but as someone who knew the real value of a person beyond title or appearance. However, the shock was just beginning. The man turned to Teresa and added with a knowing smile, "In fact, Teresa has helped create some of the most appreciated recipes by our customers, and she is the one who holds the key to the restaurant. I make sure it's that way, because I know that people like her are what truly make this place special." Murmurs of surprise, incredulous laughter, and looks that still did not understand what was happening were heard. The older couple stood and supported those words with a warm greeting. The prejudiced customers tried to save their pride, but now the humiliation was another, theirs. Teresa, with tears in her eyes, took a deep breath for the first time in a long time, felt that closed world opening. But how had she reached that point? What story did Teresa hide beyond the apron and smile? The owner asked for a glass of wine to be brought for Teresa, and she received the attention she deserved, not out of pity, but genuine respect. Even more important, the situation left a deep mark on everyone in the restaurant. A silent question: who determines the worth of someone? The uniform or the story they carry inside? Just as the night seemed to end with a lesson in humility, the owner made an announcement that left everyone speechless. This week we will launch a special menu created by Teresa with her favorite dishes and those most requested by loyal customers. Also, she will be our ambassador, representing the restaurant at events and in the media. Because here it's not just about food, but people who love what they do. The trust the owner showed towards Teresa not only elevated her dignity, but also shattered prejudices repeated 1,000 times. However, that revelation stirred a restlessness. What led Teresa to hide so much of her talent? Why did she prefer to conceal her worth in a job many looked down on? More than that, the innocent story of a simple waitress had become one of challenges, trials, and an unstoppable inner strength. Teresa was much more than a waitress, and that night, everyone had discovered it, including herself. But the story would not end there. As order seemed to be restored, the owner looked at Teresa with eyes that said, "This is just the beginning." And she responded with the most genuine smile she had had in months. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, as if washing away the wounds of injustice, making way for a new opportunity. And as the camera takes you to that final scene, the question remains: what doors will open for Teresa after this night? Will she be able to change the destiny others imagine for her? Surely everyone wants to know how this story continues, because a true voice once heard is never ignored again. And Teresa, from that night on, began to speak louder than ever. But that, friends, you will discover in the next installment. Don't miss it. The young waitress moved her hand swiftly among cups and plates, but her eyes showed the weight of every hurtful word she had heard that night. At the most luxurious table, a group of well-off-looking people whispered with haughty smiles, casting glances almost with contempt toward her. "Are you sure this is our waitress? I thought they would hire someone more professional," murmured a woman with a voice full of disdain. He, sitting beside her, nodded as his wine glass tinkled between proud fingers. She felt the invisible blow, that sensation of not belonging, of being invisible or worse, a mere obstacle in the scene of opulence in that restaurant. And yet, every day she was there, serving, cleaning, smiling despite everything. But that night, the contempt seemed to strike harder, not because she was inefficient, but because for them, her work meant less than their elegant precautions. The murmur grew, not very loud, but enough for her co-workers at the bar to notice. "We're the real waitresses in this place," asked another, laughing confidently. She lowered her gaze, trying not to show the sting of the comment. She wanted to go unnoticed, for the floor to open and swallow her, But reality did not allow that, and she repeated to herself, "It's just a job." She said it 1,000 times, but in the end, humiliation weighs more than self-help words. In the middle of the scene, there was something more than sadness, a contained fire, a silent promise that she would not remain in that place forever. Never. No one who knew her story could imagine that gray future, because behind those tired eyes, there were huge dreams, ideas her mind never tired of weaving. But now, none of that mattered to those who looked at her with arrogance. The restaurant door opened abruptly, and a figure entered. He was not an ordinary person like those at the luxury table. His bearing was different, a mix between someone who must be respected and someone who has many stories to tell. As soon as his eyes landed on the young waitress, his expression changed. Something in that moment became charged with electricity. He murmured to himself while walking straight to the bar. The customers, perhaps sensing something was about to happen, paused their conversations. Who was that man? The manager? The owner? His huge presence filled the room, and all the arrogance at that table began to fade, because they had never seen the real owner, and they did not expect his arrival to be an earthquake capable of shaking all their certainties. The man stood next to the young woman and spoke to her with a calm but firm voice. "Thank you for your work today, Sophia." She lifted her gaze, surprised, amazed by the simplicity and sincerity. It was not common to hear those words, especially from someone with authority. The scene that followed was silent, but his gestures were lethal. The man threw a direct look at the customers who had humiliated her and said, "Maybe you'd like to know that this waitress not only works here, but is one of the founding partners of this place." Disbelief took over the room. A nervous murmur began to grow. All faces turned pale. Those who had made hurtful jokes hours before now tensed, trying to justify the unjustifiable. Some stammered questions, not knowing how to act before that revelation. Sophia, with a straight back and chest swollen with the truth, stayed firm. So the next time someone wants to humiliate another for the job they do, let them remember it's not who does the job, but with what heart. The owner nodded, walked to a chalkboard where he usually wrote special messages, and in big letters wrote, "Respect for all workers, because each one makes this place great." The silence was more eloquent than any applause. At that moment, the silence said everything words could not express. Sophia was no longer the invisible waitress. She was someone who had earned respect and admiration. But how had she gotten there? What story was behind that girl who seemed so ordinary, so vulnerable? No one knew the hidden effort, the tears shed in secret, or the sleepless nights planning a different future. The truth hinted at itself, leaving behind the feeling that that moment was only the beginning of something much bigger. The scene did not go unnoticed by another diner, an older man who had been watching everything from a nearby table. His piercing gaze carried the weight of experience and wisdom. After the owner left, he approached Sophia and said in a soft but sure voice, "Today you change your destiny, but now you will have to prove this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what's coming? Because power doesn't always change everything. Sometimes it only brings new challenges." Sophia smiled, tired but with a sparkle in her eyes. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that the fight would continue. But that night, she had won a decisive battle. "I'm ready," she murmured, knowing more than ever that she deserved respect, not only from others but from herself. And at that moment, something invisible changed forever, because it was not just about being a waitress. It was about being brave. Before leaving, the owner left a final message for everyone present. "Here we don't judge by the uniform, we judge by the effort. And sometimes, those who seem the humblest are the ones holding up the whole castle." That phrase echoed through the restaurant walls, resonating in the minds of those who had considered themselves superior. Sophia looked around. Important matters were about to arrive, and she felt she was right at the center of them. The humiliation had been only a superficial layer. Beneath it, there was history, identity, and future. Everyone who had underestimated her that night was learning something fundamental. You can never judge someone without knowing all they carry inside. The owner said goodbye with a half smile, grateful for having broken the ice and changed the atmosphere of that place. As the lights dimmed, Sophia understood that the real battle was just beginning. No matter how others saw her, She had taken control of her story. And that was just the beginning. She could barely contain the rage burning in her chest when she heard that murmur again from the table at the back. That girl again? I don't know how the manager keeps letting her stay here. She's a disaster, whispered a woman in a rough voice, while fiddling with her pearls as if they were game pieces. Clara, her apron still damp with the sweat from the hours worked, clenched her fist behind the bar. She just wanted to finish her shift without any more trouble, but it seemed that night would be different. Harder. Crueler. The restaurant, an upscale place downtown, was filled with glamorous people with fake laughs and disdainful looks. The luxury on the tables, the gleaming crystal glasses, the exquisite dishes served like trophies of society that had always ignored her. Clara knew that world well. Her world was the other side. The hot kitchen, the floor that was never truly clean, the constant pressure to fake a smile while someone spoke to you as if you were invisible. But that night, fatigue took a back seat to the silent tantrum those customers provoked in her. An older man, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and an expensive coat, called her over with a whispering voice but venom in his words. "Can you bring me another coffee? Please, and this time no mistakes." Clara nodded and approached with the tray in her hands. She felt 1,000 eyes judging her, as if she was about to make the worst mistake in the world. She carefully set the cup down, but just as she turned, she stepped on the carpet unevenly and almost stumbled. Another sigh of disapproval was heard. She composed herself, took a deep breath, and returned to the bar, wishing her shift would end soon. What no one knew was that Clara was hiding a secret much bigger than her humble job as a waitress. She wasn't just a girl at the restaurant. Her story had layers no one imagined. Since she was little, she had learned to fight against adversity, to rebuild her lost dignity every time someone humiliated her. A daily battle in a world divided between those who look down from above and those who live in the shadows. While attending the table of the foremost arrogant customers in place, who mocked her quietly, her eyes swept toward the main door. Nearby, an elegant man with a cold smile made his entrance. He didn't look like just any customer. His steps were firm, his presence imposing. Clara felt a chill that wasn't from nerves or tiredness. It was something else. Something was awakening in the air, a tension different from the usual. All the diners began to look at him, and even the music in the place seemed to lower in volume. The murmur at the table grew. "Who's that guy?" a woman asked through clenched teeth, fixing her hair with annoyance. "New owner?" someone else ventured, while the previous shift's waiter winked at Clara, as if to encourage her. But the silence was broken when the man came directly toward her. He didn't greet anyone else. Only Clara. "Don't worry. I'm not some customer you'll have to put up with," he said in a deep voice, calm but loaded with authority. Clara looked at him wide-eyed, not quite understanding what was happening. "I'm Marcos, the owner of this place." That phrase echoed in her mind louder than any insult she'd heard in months. He smiled, but not a kind smile. It was a smile that knew the truth, that recognized what no one else wanted to see. "I've been listening to what they say to you. It's not fair to you." And then what no one expected happened. Marcos turned to the customers who had been humiliating her and, with one gesture, silenced them. He approached the table and, in a firm and unwavering voice, asked them what problem they had with Clara. The four were left speechless, their faces blazing red. Marcos didn't let them dodge the truth. "I found your record," he continued, "and I find it incredible that someone with so many merits and studies ends up being treated like this, simply because you look tired or because you serve the table." Marcos pulled a thick folder from his pocket and left it on the table, in front of everyone. The rich customers bowed their heads, trying to hide their shame. Clara looked at the papers in disbelief. Certificates, awards, letters of recommendation from former employers praising her professionalism and dedication. "It's not the waitress who's worthless," Marcos said firmly. "It's you who should reconsider your attitude." Everyone in the restaurant fell silent. It was as if the air had frozen. Then Marcos turned to Clara and said, "You deserve much more than this situation." From that moment on, everything began to change. Marcos proposed something to Clara she had never imagined, that she get involved in the restaurant's management, that she carry out her ideas to transform the place and give it a different air. where respect and dignity were the first items on the menu. Clara felt her legs shake, the weight of so much contempt suddenly lightening in her chest. But just when it seemed like this was a happy ending, Marcos dropped one last bomb. "There's a reason I'm here tonight. I want you to be my partner, but I need something more." Clara looked at him with questions in her eyes. "You want these people who have humiliated you to put to the test what you're worth, here and now, in front of everyone. I want to see how you handle the situation, because this is not just a test for you, but for them." The murmur among the diners turned into a collective sigh. That night, in that glamorously tense atmosphere, everything was about to explode. Clara understood that this was not just about clearing tables or serving coffee. It was a confrontation with everything that had ever tried to bring her down. And when Marcos looked at her with a mix of trust and challenge, she knew she couldn't fail. The customers who had humiliated her, now under the owner's gaze, had to prove something, because the reality no one had expected was that Clara had more power than they ever imagined. However, the true surprise was yet to come, a twist that would forever change the rules in that room, that restaurant, and perhaps in the lives of everyone present. Just as Clara was about to take the microphone to say a few words, someone burst into the establishment. A young woman, a familiar face, with tears in her eyes and a letter in her hands. "This is for you, Clara. It's time for the truth to come out," she announced in a broken voice. The letter contained a testimony no one expected, something that would test not only Clara's strength, but the integrity of the whole place and its usual customers. Glances exchanged. No one wanted to miss what was about to come next, because every word promised to challenge their prejudices and shake their certainties. And at that moment, Clara felt humiliation turn into her most powerful weapon. The story was just beginning. The real owner had placed his trust in her, but it also uncovered a secret that could destroy or build an empire. And as that silence filled the dining room with tension, Clara realized she was about to change her destiny forever. The room remained silent, tense, as if waiting for something to happen. The wealthy customers looked at each other uneasily, while Isabel kept her gaze fixed on the door through which that man had entered minutes earlier. The restaurant owner, a man no one had seen before, walked toward them with steady steps but without haste. His eyes shone with a mixture of authority and calm that instantly silenced any murmur. On his face, a barely perceptible smile seemed to conceal something deeper. It was then that a question began to pulse in the air. What was that man really doing there? And how would a single word from him change their entire world? Isabel took a deep breath, feeling a new strength rise within her. Until that moment, there had only been contempt, the glances that reduced her to a nuisance, the orders that treated her like a shadow. But now, with the owner about to intervene, everything seemed to fall into perspective. The customers who humiliated her, who made her feel invisible, seemed to unravel without knowing exactly why. At that moment, the power of truth began to unfold silently, like an unstoppable tide sweeping away false appearances. And just as the owner began to speak, his deep, confident voice captured everyone's attention in the establishment. "May I ask what you are doing?" he said, with simple firmness, without raising his voice or accusing, but carrying an authority no one dared to challenge. The haughty faces tensed upon hearing those words, but no one answered. The atmosphere was charged with invisible tension, as if everyone knew that many things would break at that moment. Isabel felt it was her chance, the turning point she had waited for, without even daring to imagine. Her heart beat strongly, but it was no longer fear she felt, rather a strange mixture of hope and determination. The time had come when her dignity would no longer be trampled, and as the owner's eyes settled on her with recognition, she felt that everything she had lived through, every insult and every tear, was beginning to make sense. Then, in the overwhelming silence, the owner continued, "Isabel is one of the people who has fought the most for this place. She has been my right hand even before I myself could come to supervise. And not only that, but her dedication has been fundamental for this restaurant to be what it is today." The unmistakable signal that something hidden was coming to light caused a nervous murmur to spread around the table where the customers sat. Some exchanged incredulous glances, as if trying to understand what that meant, while others began to look at Isabel with silent respect, as if the story they had seen up to that moment was merely a dark shadow of reality. But the surprise did not stop there. The owner took out a carefully sealed envelope and placed it on the table. This envelope contains all that is necessary to understand why Isabel is here and what value she has for this company. The silence became heavier. A man in a flawless suit dared to ask, and what could be so important as to justify that attitude? The owner turned to him with a serene but firm expression. The thing is, there are truths that are not revealed at first glance. And the greatest of them is not who I am, but who Isabel really is. The tension was palpable, and Isabel's eyes shone, though inside she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Then, the owner took a step back and pointed to a wall filled with old photos and awards, until recently unnoticed by everyone. This waitress, this woman they ridicule for her work, is also the legitimate heir of this company. Her father founded this restaurant over 30 years ago, a legacy that she has silently protected while facing the scorn of those who saw nothing beyond her uniform. The scene turned into a surge of contained emotions. The customers looked at each other without knowing what to say, as if the gag of ignorance had been removed to face a reality they could not deny. Isabel, for her part, seemed to transform into an imposing figure, not out of pride, but because the truth had freed her from invisible chains. However, just when it seemed conclusion had arrived, a doubt hung in the air. Why had she been hiding her identity? And what plans did she have now that her role was revealed? The owner anticipated it and responded calmly. Isabel chose to work here just like anyone else because her passion for this restaurant is genuine. She didn't want her story to define how she was treated. But now that everything is clear, I hope we learn a lesson about respect and humility. Just then, Isabel approached the table where she had once been despised. Her steps were firm, but her voice was soft. I didn't come here to take revenge or to demand privileges. I just want to be seen for who I am, not for what I wear. The surprise on the faces was so great that the words seemed to resonate inside every person present, like an unexpected echo awakening awareness. But the most impactful moment came when one of the customers, the most arrogant one, lowered his gaze and, without saying anything, got up and left. Silence once again reigned, but this time it was different, filled with respect and understanding. Isabel and the owner exchanged a knowing look that sealed their alliance and marked the beginning of a new chapter. Meanwhile, the waitress began to receive sincere apologies from some customers who had learned the hard way the importance of empathy. For Isabel, however, the greatest lesson was that dignity does not reside in a title or social position, but in the way one recognizes oneself and stands up to contempt. And although her story had changed radically, she knew the most important battle had only just begun. To prove that a person's worth does not depend on the position they hold, but on the strength with which they face their life. Thus, as the night progressed, the restaurant filled with a transformed atmosphere, where silent justice prevailed, and a relentless truth made it clear that no one should judge another by their appearance. But just when everyone thought the story had come to an end, the owner turned to Isabel with an unexpected proposal. I know you have worked hard, and I want this place to be a reflection of your dreams. How about we together take this restaurant to a level no one imagines, starting by giving every worker the dignity they deserve? The word surprised Isabel and those present because they not only offered a different future for the restaurant, but also carried a powerful message. It was time to break the norms and build from respect. And as the dining room lights shone with new meaning, the young waitress understood that her journey was just beginning, that the true revolution was not in titles or money, but in the justice of seeing each person as a world full of stories, battles, and dreams. Thus, on that unforgettable night, in a restaurant that seemed ordinary, an extraordinary story was written, a lesson about courage, humanity, and redemption. And although many still did not know it, that young waitress was destined to change more than her own fate. She was about to transform the way everyone saw the world around them. And you, what would you do if you were in her place? Would you be able to endure humiliation and wait for the right moment for the truth to come to light? Because sometimes true strength lies in enduring, believing, and surprising everyone with a truth no one expected. But the story doesn't end here. There are still questions to be answered and challenges to face. Because in this game of appearances and realities, nothing is as simple as it seems. Want to know what happens next? Don't miss the next part, because everything is about to change. As the whispers grew louder, the young waitress firmly picked up the tray she barely held with a trembling hand. The group of wealthy customers at the back table kept making cutting remarks, glances loaded with contempt that burned more than any stove. Do we really have to be served by her? She doesn't even know how to ask for a drink, they whispered among themselves, exchanging smug smiles. She kept her head held high, making a superhuman effort not to let the words pierce her like daggers. But the atmosphere was heavy, and every condescending tone was another weight on her already tired shoulders. Among the customers, a woman dressed in expensive clothes with a haughty air let out a laugh. I'm sure this girl hasn't even finished high school. And the company hired someone like that? What a shame. Next to her, a man with a gold watch cast a look mixing disdain and mockery, as if to make clear that for them, it was impossible for someone in that position to have real aspirations. The social pressure was overwhelming. It was palpable in the air, an invisible barrier that prevented them from seeing in her anything more than a mere waitress, unseen and dispensable. The young woman walked to the other table, ignoring the invisible needles that seemed to pierce her skin. She glanced sideways at the rest of the dining room. Other customers smiled distractedly. Some exchanged knowing looks at the spectacle inadvertently unfolding, but no one intervened. In that moment, she closed her eyes for a second, recalling that cold morning when she accepted the job, searching for a start, a path out of the uncertainty that marked her life, something that would push her to get up every day with hope. She had not expected the storm of humiliation. As she served a drink to a couple who gave her an evasive glance, she heard a different voice from afar. Something changed, a voice that did not fit the usual murmur of the place. Ladies and gentlemen, if you allow me. The voice was firm, determined, carrying a presence that commanded respect without raising its tone. She turned, and there he was, a man of elegant but simple bearing, with a warm smile that contrasted with the atmosphere filled with arrogance. His eyes had a spark that shone brighter than any lamp in the venue. He was the owner of the restaurant. Yes, the one who disappeared behind the scenes, invisible to everyone's eyes, but always with everything under control. The extremely wealthy customers froze, as if the figure of that man reminded them that power does not always wear gold or flaunt expensive watches. The owner headed straight to where the young waitress stood, with firm steps and a look that inspired pride. He leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "You have done an excellent job today. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." A sigh of relief and surprise escaped her as she felt an unknown weight beginning to lift from her shoulders. But what came next was even more unexpected. The owner approached the table hosting the most arrogant customers and, with an enigmatic smile, began to speak in a low but clear voice. "I'm surprised to see so much disdain towards someone who knows this place better than many here." The leader of the group stood up, uncomfortable, trying to assert himself. "What exactly do you mean?" he asked, trying to regain control. The owner smiled calmly and dropped a phrase that silenced the entire room. "This young woman is not new here. She is my main partner and holds 40% of the shares in this restaurant." Disbelief painted everyone's faces. The same girl who had just been the object of mockery now carried a weight none of them had even imagined. A tense but amused silence settled as the waitress processed what the owner had just revealed. The very person so many saw as a simple, unimportant face was now someone indispensable, someone with real power. The previous laughter turned into evasive looks. The woman at the table couldn't help but say, "But how is that possible? She just looks like a girl who serves tables." And then the owner responded, slowly, "Appearances are deceiving. She started here from the bottom, when I myself gave her that opportunity. What she has achieved is a result of her effort, intelligence, and integrity. If you want us to keep serving here, maybe you should learn to respect the person who makes this all work." A murmur of astonishment spread through the room, but the story didn't end there. The owner approached the bar and asked for something that made everyone look again with attention. He pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket pocket and, with a sly smile, explained, "I wanted to share with you something that explains who this young woman really is." Before anyone could react, he unveiled images and documents that clarified the mystery. Old photos showed the young woman taking her first steps, surrounded by people who hadn't always believed in her. Documents proved her involvement in management, creativity in decoration, and even in the restaurant's menu strategy. She was much more than the friendly face serving coffee and taking orders. The customers began exchanging confused looks. How could someone they had so easily despised be, in reality, a key piece? And why had they never been shown this truth? The owner's young partner, with her head held high, seemed transformed. The weight of humiliation was turning into strength to prove she had reached this point not by chance, but because she had fought relentlessly. The atmosphere filled with vibrant energy, as if the place itself recognized the justice in that revelation. The owner didn't stop there. With a gesture that put every doubt to rest, he invited everyone to try the house specialty, a dish created by the young waitress. As she proudly served her creations to those who had once looked down on her, the truth manifested in every bite, a mix of flavors telling a story of effort, dedication, and passion. The restaurant changed that night, not just because of the owner's words or the documents shown, but because respect began to take root in every glance, every gesture. No one could ignore anymore that the young woman was much more than a simple face behind the bar. But just when it seemed everything was resolved, a question hung in the air. Why, despite all her effort and talent, had she been forced to carry that stigma until that moment? How many other times had she been underestimated, hidden behind prejudice? The story remained open, and the young waitress knew this was only the beginning. Because sometimes the greatest power is not in money or visible titles, but in the ability to stand firm when everything seems to collapse around you. And as the night progressed with that mix of admiration and surprise, a new chapter for her and the restaurant began to be written. Nothing would ever be the same again, neither for the customers nor the staff, nor for those who thought they could decide someone's value by their appearance. The truth had come to light, but above all, it had opened the door to new questions and challenges no one dared to imagine. And in that moment, everyone understood that true respect cannot be bought or imposed. It is earned step by step, with every act, with every story like this one that was just beginning. Just as the customers began to murmur disdainfully among themselves, casting sideways glances at Camila with that mix of contempt and paternalism that only those who believe themselves superior know how to express, the restaurant door creaked loudly. Everyone instinctively turned toward the entrance, and in an instant, the atmosphere changed. The haughty chatter stopped. Camila clutched her apron to her chest, unsure of what to expect. From the door emerged a man whose presence commanded respect without a single word needing to be said. Tall, elegant, with sharp gaze, this man had an aura that silenced the room. He was clearly not just any customer. Among the tables, they whispered, "Is that the owner? I haven't seen him before." The man advanced with a steady step, neither hurried nor slow, directly toward the table where the roughest customers were insulting Camila. Their words, which until a moment ago cut through the air like knives, faded as they felt the immense pressure emanating from the restaurant owner. Each of the elegant patrons now seemed like a child caught misbehaving, unable to maintain their arrogance. For the first time in hours, Camila lifted her gaze with a mixture of surprise and hope. The owner stopped in front of the table, and then something unexpected happened. With a calm but firm smile, he explained that the restaurant had just undergone a profound administrative change, and that she, the despised waitress, had been personally recommended by him as a customer service manager. This choice was no coincidence. He had known Camila's integrity and dedication for a long time. She was his right hand, and she was there to ensure that respect and excellence would be the norm, not the exception. The customers, bewildered, could barely stammer an apology. That simple revelation unleashed a surge of emotions, but also many questions. How could it be that those who had just humiliated her were the same ones who were unaware of the truth about her and her role in the restaurant? Why didn't they know? And more importantly, what was Camila going to do now? Finally legitimized before those who had scorned her? The tension in the room was palpable, and as the owner cast a deep look at his new manager, Camila began to regain the confidence some had tried to take from her. But the story did not end there. The real twist was yet to come, and no one, not even her, could predict what consequences that unexpected turn of events would have for everyone present. The customers, now in an uncomfortable position, looked at Camila with different eyes, tried to read in her face that silent strength they had not noticed before. Some tried to justify their actions. Others simply lowered their gaze. But the young waitress, emboldened by the owner's support, stepped forward and firmly told them that respect in that place was an inviolable rule. She would no longer accept humiliation or attitudes that degraded anyone. Her message struck deep in the room, and silence fell completely, broken only by the soft clinking of cutlery some nervous person dropped. In the eyes of those who had harshly judged her, astonishment and shame glimmered. No one expected that humble young woman, who to them was just another waitress, to have the strength to set boundaries like that. But at the same time, the owner took a step further and decided to share a personal story that would shift everyone's perspective even more. He told of how Camila had overcome enormous obstacles since arriving at the restaurant. She had started as an apprentice, almost invisible, but with such a strong work ethic and a big heart that she had won him over. A businessman used to measuring success in numbers, not people. His testimony was authentic and raw. He spoke of long nights, moments of doubt, when Camila decided not to give up even when it seemed everything was against her. He revealed details no one suspected, such as how she had sacrificed many times to ensure the place maintained its prestige, even when her superiors did not fully support her. He recounted how she had uncovered hidden flaws, mediated internal conflicts, and proposed changes that increased clientele and improved the establishment's reputation. That revelation not only humanized her, but also overturned the narrative that the customers had held until then. The atmosphere became almost electric. Camila began receiving looks of admiration and respect, a stark contrast to the coldness they had shown minutes earlier. However, this rapid transformation sparked an unexpected reaction in some, disbelief and even suspicion. Could it be that someone they had so superficially judged held such an important role? The doubt lingered in the air, creating new suspense about what those customers would do next. Would they accept what had just been revealed, or try to regain control of the situation through some maneuver? Sensing the tension, the owner decided to invite everyone for a drink to celebrate the new direction of the restaurant and, above all, the vision Camila would bring from that moment on. It was then that one of the roughest customers, a man with vulgar face and hostile attitude, raised his voice to question the decision. He said it was unfair for a waitress to make important decisions, insinuating that those kinds of roles were reserved for people with experience and formal education. The room froze for a second, and Camila felt a lump form in her throat. But then, something inside her ignited like a flame she couldn't extinguish. With a serene smile charged with conviction, Camila responded that experience is not always measured by titles, but by commitment, results, and love for what one does. She recalled how she herself had helped that restaurant rise again when it was on the brink of closure. Her words hit deeply, leaving many speechless. The owner looked at her proudly and nodded, reaffirming his confidence in the young woman. That moment was like a turning point. The downtrodden waitress had become the symbol of the unexpected, of the silent strength within those who never give up. But just when everything seemed to fall into place, one more twist surprised everyone. Suddenly, by the entrance, an elegant woman appeared, her presence eclipsing even that of the original owner. She introduced herself as the true owner of the restaurant. Everyone was stunned. How was it possible no one had seen that coming? The woman explained that she had temporarily sold the place to rescue from a financial crisis and was now returning to reclaim control and enforce her vision. She looked at Camila with a mix of acknowledgement and challenge, making clear that this story was far from over. The young waitress, her eyes fixed on this new figure, felt a chapter still more intense and revealing opening in her life. What would be the next move? What secrets did the new owner hide? Silence took over the room as everyone held their breath, waiting. It was impossible not to wonder what impact this revelation would have on Camila and her recent position. The tension had escalated to a level no one imagined, and expectations were at their peak. No one could look away. They knew they were witnessing something much bigger than a simple story of humiliation and redemption. It was a lesson in life, courage, and truth. And amid that whirlwind of emotions, one certainty grew strong. That young waitress was about to take a decisive step that would forever change the fate of everyone. The murmur in the restaurant grew louder with every passing second. Marta remained calm as she served the last drinks, but her face showed a mixture of fatigue and frustration. The customers at the table by the window didn't take their eyes off her, casting looks filled with disdain and barely audible whispers, but clear enough for her to feel them. "Who dares to treat us like this?" they said, throwing sharp comments about her way of speaking, her uniform, and even her apparent manners. Marta, a young woman who had left everything behind to make her way in the city, just wanted to do her job with dignity. But these people seemed determined to remind her that, to them, she was nothing more than a shadow in their perfect day. However, at that very moment, just as the atmosphere was about to burst with tension, the main door opened with a sharp bang. Everyone turned their heads. It was no ordinary customer or delivery person. It was someone with a presence that filled the entire place, an authority that this establishment hadn't seen in months. The conversation dropped in volume. Expressions changed as if by magic. Marta felt a small spark of hope. Could it be the owner? The real owner? He didn't rush to sit down or order from a menu. He walked slowly, observing every table, every corner, as if searching for something hidden. The wealthy patrons still whispered among themselves, unaware of the change that was about to come. His eyes finally rested on Marta, who remained in her place, with a fragile but firm smile. With a clear and steady voice, the man called her name. "Martita, come here for a moment, please." Everyone fell silent. The restaurant owner, with that penetrating gaze, was inviting the waitress to come forward without further ado. Marta felt her heart pounding 1,000 beats per minute, but didn't hesitate. She walked toward him, and with each step, the silence grew heavier, as if the entire room was holding its breath. The customers who had humiliated her looked at each other, nervous and confused. "What's happening? Why is he calling her?" they muttered. "I want everyone here to know something about Martita," the owner began, not raising his voice, but with weight in every word. "She is not just our waitress. She is the key piece that saved this place during the hardest days. While some of you treated her as if she was nobody, she was here, working extra hours, solving problems nobody else wanted to touch." The room filled with an uncomfortable silence. The story he was about to tell was unknown to everyone, and each word seemed to take their breath away. It seemed the owner carried an invisible burden on his shoulders, and that this young woman was the reason the restaurant was still alive. His words revealed a Marta who not only served coffee and waited tables, but was also behind the scenes, fixing countless unforeseen problems, helping co-workers, motivating the team, and even managing a crisis that could close the establishment for good. Those who had scorned her just minutes before could not believe what they were hearing. The woman they despised, ignored, or reprimanded without reason was actually the backbone of that restaurant. Some customers' jaws tightened, and others' eyes filled with guilt and shame. Everyone wondered how they hadn't realized it sooner. But the owner didn't stop there. Martita is also a partner in this business. She owns a percentage of the restaurant that no one mentioned this afternoon. Faces shifted from disbelief to amazement, and murmurs like, "What? Her? Really?" spread around. Some tried to hide their surprise, while others, more direct, looked down. Marta remained calm, though inside she felt a mixture of relief and justice. At last, the veil of prejudice against her was beginning to fall. "This," the owner continued, "is a lesson for all of us. Not everything you see is the truth. Don't be fooled by appearances. Behind every person, there is effort, a story of overcoming much more than your eyes can capture in a single glance." He paused, looking directly at those who had spoken poorly of Marta. "I want you to apologize, not only to her, but to yourselves for having judged so quickly." The words echoed through the room like a verdict and, at the same time, an opportunity. A few customers stood up, stammering apologies. Others remained seated, confused and thoughtful. However, the tension was dissipating, replaced by a gentler atmosphere, with a newly discovered air of respect. Marta, for the first time in hours, smiled with a confidence she had not shown before. But then a new question arose, inevitable and heavy with mystery. Why had the owner waited so long to reveal this truth? What consequences would it have for the restaurant, for those customers, and for Marta? He looked at them intently and said, "There is much more behind this facade, secrets that must come to light before the story continues." With that, the owner gestured toward a door at the back of the establishment and called Marta to accompany him. The customers watched expectantly as she stood up, knowing that what was about to happen would change everything they thought they knew. And although some tried to get up to follow them, the owner raised a hand and said firmly, "Wait here. It's not time to go yet." At that moment, a heavy silence filled the room, but also the electrifying sensation that they were about to discover something much bigger than they imagined. The humiliated waitress, the hidden piece in that puzzle, had begun to take control of her own story. The owner, until then a distant figure, became the unexpected narrator of a guarded secret. Glances crossed full of tension, doubts, and almost tangible anticipation. What secrets did that back door, where Marta and the owner had just entered, hold? What hidden truths were about to be revealed? No one could imagine that this moment would mark a before and after for everyone in that restaurant. While all this was happening, Marta took a deep breath and felt that, despite everything she had lived through, she was ready to face whatever came next. Because finally, the truth was coming to light, and nothing would ever be the same. When silence broke the atmosphere heavy with contempt, all eyes turned to the restaurant's main door. An imposing figure appeared there, elegant yet carrying a natural authority that needed no boasting. The murmur ceased instantly. The owner had arrived, and with him, tension tightened a knot in everyone's stomachs. No one expected someone so important to take an interest in a young waitress who, just minutes earlier, had been the subject of mockery and disdain. She, holding a tired but dignified smile, could hardly believe what was happening around her. The customers who had humiliated her minutes before were now trapped in an uncomfortable silence full of uncertainty. The man walked with determined steps, his gaze sweeping the dining room as if evaluating every detail. However, it was to her that he addressed his first and only remarks. "Lola, right? I want to thank you for how you handled the situation today. You've shown more professionalism and courage than many who think themselves superior." His voice was firm but warm, contrasting with the harshness of what they had just experienced. Lola felt something inside her explode in a torrent of emotions: surprise, pride, relief. Not only was she being heard, but valued. The arrogance of those who belittled her now only served to make her dignity shine even brighter. The wealthy customers looked at the owner with a mixture of shame and confusion. One of them, trying to save face, stammered a clumsy excuse but was quickly interrupted. "Here, we demand respect for everyone, no matter who you are or what you do. If you have a problem with someone who works here, I invite you to reconsider where you put your attitude." The owner's authority left no room for replies, and in that moment, the restaurant that had been a space of prejudice and humiliation began to transform before everyone's eyes. But the story did not end there. Noticing the surprise in their eyes, the owner approached Lola and added a detail no one expected to hear. "I want to tell you something few know. This restaurant was founded by my mother, a woman who worked hard from the bottom up, with a huge heart and unbreakable will. Lola, you represent that same spirit, not because of the work you do, but because of who you are as a person." The customers were stunned. The young waitress they had underestimated was not just another employee. She was a living embodiment of the values this place was meant to defend. At that moment, the atmosphere changed completely. Some began to apologize, others simply lowered their gaze, and the situation became a mirror in which everyone could see their own prejudices reflected. But for Lola, it was not just a momentary victory. It was the beginning of something new. The owner invited her to have a coffee in a small private room within the restaurant, away from curious eyes. There, with a kind voice, he proposed a project that would surprise her even more. "I want you to be part of a team that will take care of renewing not only the premises, but also the way we treat our customers and employees. People with your integrity and dedication deserve more." Lola could barely contain her excitement. Everything she had endured, from the contemptuous looks to the sharp words, now found an unexpected meaning. It was not just about overcoming a bad moment, but about changing the destiny of her own life. That night, as she cleaned the empty tables, a genuine smile lit up her face. Outside, the city lights flickered, but inside, something much brighter had begun to ignite: hope. But the story raised another question in the air. What would happen to those customers who did not learn the lesson? Were they willing to leave their prejudices behind, or would they fight to maintain the status quo? The owner, with his presence and words, had exposed a value system that seemed unbreakable. However, like every real story, this one was not just black and white. There were grays, internal conflicts, and the possibility of second chances. Before leaving, the owner looked around once more and pointed out, "This place is not just a business. It's a home for many. And like every family, we have to care for and respect each other." It was then that, suddenly, the door burst open with a struggle, and an older man, dressed in simple clothes and barefoot, entered the place. Everyone was left open-mouthed when they recognized him. He was the elderly man Lola had helped get inside a few hours earlier when he was confused and seemed lost. The owner introduced him. "This is Don Pedro, my father. He also knows what it's like to start from the bottom. He is the reason we created this space for people like you." Silence took over like a slow wave as everyone digested the new revelation. What had begun as a story of humiliation and contempt was turning into a deep lesson about dignity, respect, and humanity. Lola was no longer the victim. She had been the catalyst for a necessary change. But the most powerful question continued to hang in the air. How many people would truly be willing to open their hearts to learn something new? With each passing second, Lola's figure grew stronger, not because of the power she wielded, but because of the example she set. She walked with her head held high, knowing that, although the road might still be difficult, she now had something more valuable than any job, the certainty that she deserved respect, and that sometimes is the first step toward changing not just a situation, but the entire world. However, just when it seemed the night was coming to an end, one last surprise broke the atmosphere. While everyone was speaking softly, a message arrived on the owner's phone. His eyes shone with contained intensity, and with a mysterious smile, he announced, "It seems this story is just beginning. There's someone else who will want to meet Lola, and believe me, it won't be so easy to ignore her this time." The murmur grew. The tension returned renewed, and everyone knew without words that what they had just witnessed was only the beginning of a much larger saga. Thus, the night closed its curtain with a mix of unease and hope, with a restaurant that would never be the same again, and with a young waitress whose destiny was just beginning to be written. The truth, as always, had come to light to leave everyone in shock. But the question floating in the air was clear. Were they really ready to face what was coming? Because sometimes justice and dignity unleash forces that even the most powerful cannot control. As the murmur inside the place grew louder, she adjusted with trembling hands a tray she had forgotten to dry completely. At that moment, the sharp gazes of those wealthy customers pierced her mercilessly. "Is this how you serve here? Don't you know how to choose your staff?" a woman murmured in a shrill and venomous voice, pointing at the way she tried to maintain her composure. The young waitress listened to them, caught between shame and anger, unable to break the silence that weighed heavily on the atmosphere. Every bitter comment was a dagger, but no one seemed willing to stop that public humiliation. However, just when it seemed that the weight of that cruelty would overwhelm her, the restaurant door opened with a sharp bang that cut through the dense air as if someone had thrown a lightning bolt. Everyone turned to see who had interrupted the scene. He appeared walking with a calm step, but his presence exuded a natural authority that silenced the room. He was the owner of the place, though no one had noticed until that moment. His gaze was direct and piercing toward the mocking customers, then rested on her, the humiliated waitress, with an unexpected mix of recognition and respect. The relief she tried to hide appeared on her face, but also a spark that promised something was about to change forever. The owner approached the table where the most arrogant customers were arguing, with a smile that was not quite kind, but genuine. "Allow me to clarify a few things," he said in a firm but measured voice. The customer, surprised, took a step back, still not understanding the real reason for his visit. Suddenly, he began revealing secrets no one had suspected. The true reasons why that young woman was there, the immense effort hidden behind her smile, and above all, the hidden bond between her and himself. Why was this man, who seemed to own such a vast empire, so attentive to a waitress no one had recognized until then? Every word he spoke opened a new unknown chapter, sowing more doubts and expectations among all present. As the pieces of that invisible puzzle began to fit together, the young waitress ceased to be the victim, and became the unexpected protagonist of a much deeper story. She was not just a girl working out of necessity. There was something unique in her past, something that explained why the owner had waited so long to reveal the exact truth at that very moment. Emotions welled up in her chest and eyes, and, unknowingly, also in those of the people who had scorned her before. The humiliation turned into amazement, the indifference into admiration. But the story did not end there, because just when it seemed the truth had come to light, a new lingering question rose in the air, one no one expected, but now everyone longed to hear. It was as if the restaurant, that setting that had witnessed so many disguised injustices, changed its atmosphere in seconds. The power of silence, charged with hidden meanings, cleared the way for a lesson about courage and dignity that went far beyond a simple dispute between customers and waitresses. And though the owner kept speaking, everyone in that place knew that what was coming next would change not only perception of that moment, but also the way they saw the people who, quietly and steadily, hold the world up with their daily effort. Because behind every gesture, every apparent mistake, there is a story waiting to be heard and understood. What secrets did she keep? What plans did he have? And most importantly, what would happen now that the truth could no longer be hidden?